Hello and welcome back to another episode of Giga Hertz TV. In case this is your first run-in with me, I am Rick, and in today's video we're going to discuss building your first computer and what this has to do with it. So as that old saying goes, let's hit the ground running here. Now that first PC build that you're going to ever do is probably just going to come down to that one factor that pretty much everything else comes down to, and it's going to be that cache. So keeping that in mind, I would have to say that your minimum budget for a decent gaming build, now I'm saying gaming, not something that your mom's going to use for checking her Facebook, check on the family or anything like that, or send off emails or anything like that. This is for gaming. So the minimum budget for a decent gaming build is probably going to be at least $500. Now that's just going to get you your decently performing components, and it may cost you a little more than those consoles like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, but it'll give you the option of performing higher than 1080p and greater than 30 to 60 frames per second. Let the flame wars begin. Now the first thing that we're going to be buying on the list is going to be the CPU. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit, and that is pretty much just going to be the brain and the brawn, and pretty much everything you do passes through the CPU. Now, it isn't very hard to be choosing a CPU, especially nowadays. If you are looking to get something from the Intel side, their new iteration of their processors, the Skylake processors, the 6000 series, those are fantastic for gaming, but they're not exactly on the budget side, especially since the new i7 processor supports DDR4 memory, which is expensive, and I will get to that later. But if you're getting something on the budget side, you'd want to probably get something like this. This is AMD's APU. This is their 7870 Godavari CPU. This is actually not a CPU. They label it as an APU. What this is that it is a central processor and video card all in one. So this has 4 cores dedicated to the central processing unit and 8 cores dedicated to the video processing unit. If you're not getting a standalone video card, I would highly suggest getting something like this. If you are getting a standalone video card, I would suggest at the very least Intel's Core i5 processor. You could get a Core i3, but that is, I'd have to say, scraping the bottom of the bucket in terms of performance. The Core i5 will be your best bet for performance in gaming. The i7 is going to eliminate any of those bottlenecks that you think you may possibly have, but is going to be running at a higher price. It will come with hyper-threading, which means that any sort of physical cores you have will make it seem like you have double. So if you have a 4-core i7 with hyper-threading, it's going to be seen as an 8-core processor on your computer, which helps out with video processing, any sort of like Adobe After Effects, 3D rendering, stuff like that. Now, if you're going to be gaming and doing video processing, something I would suggest would be their Extreme processors from Intel. Those are going to be marked with an X at the end of all their numbered iterations. Right now, the king of the hill is going to be that 5960X. Now that is an expensive monster, but it is a monster nonetheless. Now it's not exactly just going to wreck house on your games, but it is going to perform just as decent as those other i7 processors. It's going to perform slightly better than your i5s, but I would not suggest buying it if you're going to just be gaming. that is something that is more of a luxury. Unless you're going to be video processing, then that is the perfect choice for you. So you're looking through all those processors and you think you have one picked out. Well, just a warning to you, if you're going to pick any of Intel's 6000 series processors, if it has a K at the end of it, it is not going to be coming with a stock cooler. So what are you going to have to do about that? Well, you're going to have buy a CPU cooler, an aftermarket CPU cooler, which actually I suggest for just about any other PC build that you're going to be doing, especially if you're going to be gaming. Gaming will stress out your components a whole lot more than general workloads will. So keeping those components cooler is to your benefit, because if a component gets too hot, it is going to do something called thermal throttling, which means it will bring down its own performance in order to bring down the temperature of the unit. Now, if you keep that temperature cool, you will actually get maximum performance all the time. So a CPU cooler will only benefit you, and they're not going to be running you that high of a price. General CPU air coolers will start at, I'd say, around $30 and go anywhere upwards of $100. Now, if you want to get something even that'll keep it even cooler, you can do something like the all-in-one liquid coolers that are available today. Corsair, we have NXT, NZXT, any of those other main manufacturers, they have those all-in-one liquid coolers. They're just one loop just for your CPU. You don't have to worry about pumps, you don't have to worry about tubes, fittings, reservoirs, radiators, anything like that. It's all in one neat package and it keeps everything really cool. Those will start anywhere from like $50 all the way up to $250. I'm just throwing those numbers out there. Alright, CPU, check. Cooler for CPU, also check. Now we're moving on to the motherboard. Now, the motherboard size is going to dictate the size of your computer. Now, I say size, and that's going to refer to these names that you'll see when you're looking up your motherboard. And these names are going to be MITX, MATX, ATX, and EATX. They're going up in size in that order. Now, if you want something that is small form factor, like the case that I showed in my last video, that small Obsidian 250D from Corsair, you're going to look for a motherboard that goes by the name MITX. If you want something large, like what I have over there, that is going to be something like ATX or EATX. EATX is just extended ATX and is going to be a little longer. Now, size is just going to be one part about picking out your motherboard. The next part is going to be going back to that CPU and looking for something called the socket. Now, the socket is what's going to be holding the CPU to your motherboard, and having those match is generally a good idea if you want your PC to work. Now, on the Intel side of these sockets, you're going to be looking for something like the LGA 2011-3, LGA 1150, LGA 1151. They generally stick with those like numbered system sockets. For the AMD, you're going to have the AM3, the FM2, FM2 Plus, stuff like that. So once you have the size of your motherboard picked out, next you gotta look for the socket type, and then after that we move on to cases. Now, cases is a whole nother animal altogether. Cases, the selection of cases is huge. So this is going to take you quite some time. This is going to be something that is going to be aesthetically pleasing. This is what you're going to be looking at more than anything else once you have your computer built. So this will be a tough decision. They range anywhere from these tiny little cases all the way up to these like monstrosities that I have sitting behind me, and even bigger. Oh, this is turning into a longer video than I thought. I'm thirsty, hungry. Let's take this somewhere else. And so now that we have all of our other components all picked out, now it's time to move on to those juicy innards. And the next thing on our list is going to be memory. Now for that, we only have to worry about two things really. The size that you want, so how much it can store, and the speed. Speed. Alrighty then. Alright, so I guess that was a bit of a lie. There's some things you gotta worry about more than you gotta do size and speed first. You gotta check whether your CPU and motherboard both support the same memory type. Now, memory type I am referring to whether it's going to be DDR3 or DDR4. And we're in a special time right now in computer's life when we're transferring between the two. DDR4 is going to be faster, of course, but DDR3 is still mainstream, I'd have to say. So that's just up to whether your CPU and motherboard can support it. So we got our type of memory all picked out. Now size. Size, I'd have to say you probably want to go with a minimum of 8 gigs for gaming. 8 gigs is going to allow you to run some minor applications in the background, like maybe Windows Explorer, stuff like that, maybe a couple files open, and play your games at the same time. Or just one really demanding game. It's probably going to take around 6 gigs. But 8 gigs is probably going to be your minimum. Now anything above that is going to be a luxury. Let's say you want 12 gigs. 12 gigs is going to be perfect if you want to be running your Google Chrome with 40 different tabs in your games at the same time. I don't suggest that. But you can. And another thing is going to be speed. Speed is a bit subjective actually. Whereas if you're running just a regular CPU and GPU, I mean independent video card, not the AMD APU at all. If you're running a regular CPU and regular video card all standalone, memory speed isn't going to matter a whole lot in terms of game performance. Now, if you get the AMD APU that I was suggesting earlier for budget people, the only thing that you really got to worry about then is going to be memory speed. Because with a regular video card, they already have high-speed memory already loaded onto the card themselves. Now, if you're running the AMD APU, it's going to benefit not only from more space on the RAM, but more speed. That is going to give you a direct performance impact for the AMD APU, where it's not going to so much for other regular CPUs. This is a quick little known fact for you guys. Did you know that your RAM is technically considered volatile memory? So in other words, it needs power to maintain whatever sort of data is stored in the memory. Now, you're saying, what does that mean exactly? It means if you crash, you lose everything. Now, if you don't want to lose everything, you're going to hit that magical save button in the top corner of your screen and save it to a hard drive. So in case of a crash, you're going to be safe. Oh, yes. There we go. Now we're on the subject of hard drives. Hard drives will come in one of two flavors. You're going to have your mechanical drives, which are going to have your higher capacities but slower speeds. Then you're going to have your solid state drives, which are going to be lower capacity, faster, but more expensive. But first we'll talk about those mechanical drives. Those mechanical drives, what that actually means is that there's actual moving parts on the inside of this hard drive. There's a little spinning disk that records all that data that you want to save to it. Now, these are going to come in higher capacities at cheaper prices, but like I said, they're going to operate slower than a solid state drive. Now, those solid state drives, they don't actually have any moving parts on the inside. They are going to be a little smaller. They're going to hold less for the same price at the very least. but they're going to operate a whole lot faster because they don't have to spin up any sort of disk on the inside to get to that information that you need. Now, for a budget build, I would say you'd have to go with a 2 terabyte mechanical hard drive. That would be the best value that you can get, the most gigs per dollar, if you will. Now, I say gigs, but I refer to it as a terabyte. What that means is a terabyte is equal to 1024 gigabytes of storage. Now, if you look at getting a 2 terabyte solid state drive, that's going to run you about, I want to say, $950 to maybe like $1,000. Whereas if you get a 2 terabyte mechanical drive, that's going to run you more like $100 to $150. Now, the reason for that being is that flash memory for those solid state drives is a little on the expensive side right now. They are getting lower by the day. I remember when I bought my solid state drive, it's a 240 gig solid state. I bought that for about $300. And as of right now, the same 240 gig solid state drive is, I want to say $110, $130. So they are dropping, and they're dropping fast. But if you still want that massive amount of storage, you just can't beat those mechanical drives right now. Now we're going to move on to something that I feel is kind of overlooked in most PC builds, and that is going to be the power supply. Now, the power supply doesn't necessarily supply power in a sense that you don't have to plug it in. You still have to plug it into the wall. But what it's going to do is it's going to take that raw, untamed power from your wall outlet, fire it into this little box that you've situated somewhere in your computer case, and then use that power and distribute it as needed in a fashion that is tailored to these components, such as your hard drive, your CPU, your video card, all that stuff. Now, for a budget build, I'd probably have to suggest a 500 watt, maybe at the minimum 500 watt power supply. If you want the ability to expand to a standalone video card someday, I would suggest a 650 watt power supply. That should give you plenty of power and a little bit of headroom so you can throw in an extra video card of your choosing. Now, if you want to do multiple video cards, or you want to do some water cooling, I would suggest moving upwards of like the 850 watt to 1000 watt area. They make all the way up to 1500 watt power supplies. That I feel may be a bit overkill, but I can be proven wrong by that. Now, there's something interesting on these power supplies, and that is going to be an 80 plus certification. It's going to start at 80 plus bronze and move its way all the way up to 80 plus platinum. I would not suggest buying a power supply that does not have any of these badges. They do bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Again, don't buy them if they don't have this badge. Power supplies, they're not as finicky as they used to be. If you buy any of those big brand power supplies, you can pretty much rest assured it's probably going to operate very well. They have EVGA, Corsair, Bitphoenix, Seasonic, all those great power supply manufacturers for providing great quality products. It's not something you really have to look out for as much as you used to, especially with those 80 plus bronze or 80 plus badges floating around on them. Now, I keep referring to that. What those actually mean is just the efficiency of those power supplies. The bronze being the lowest efficiency, whereas the platinum being the highest, most efficient power supplies at delivering that power that you need. So what are these power supplies actually doing? Well, I'd have to say that they are providing the fuel for your components. Just like this this burger is going to provide fuel for my videos. 1 minute. Fuel. Okay, now, last but most certainly not least, we're going to move on to the video card. Now, the video card I saved for last because I feel any sort of leftover budget you may have that you're saving up towards your computer should be funneled into a video card. Now, I feel the video card should be the most expensive part of your gaming build, if it's a gaming build. Otherwise, maybe the CPU would be the highest. If you're going for that tight budget APU type build, I would maybe disregard this section for another time. But having said that, we have two major manufacturers to choose from when it comes to video cards, and I'm going to split these up into 3 different categories. We're going to have good, better, and best. Now I'm going to refer to these card manufacturers as red team and green team. You'll be able to figure out which one's which when shopping for your video card, I assure you. Okay, starting off with that good section, from the green team, we have the GTX 950 and we also have the GTX 960. Now these are going to start off at $170 and move up from there. But from the red team, we're going to have that from their previous generation, the R9 270 and the R9 380. In regards to that 380 though, I would say that one's riding that borderline between good and better. It's definitely not best, but it's riding that line. Now, moving on to that better section, we have from the green team again, we have that 970 and the 980. And from the red team, we have that 380 again, I would have to say, and the R9 390. The 390X would be riding that line to the top tier again. So, without further ado, we can move on to that best section. Now, the best section is going to have that 390X, but it's also going to have the Fury, the R9 Fury from the red team. Now, from the green team selection, we're going to have that GTX 980 Ti, and I guess I have to say it, we're going to also have the Titan X in there, though I feel that the price for performance is not there. It still does very well in games. It'll beat out reference 980 Ti's, but it will not beat out those custom PCB 980 Ti's by other manufacturers. Now, having said all of that stuff, the video card, in my opinion, is going to be your hardest choice to make. You have a lot of options to choose from and a very wide gamut of prices to go for. They start at $170 and go all the way up to $1,100. It's a lot of money. A lot of money. The next PC build I'm going to be doing is going to be less than $500, and I can tell you right now, I spent more on my one video card than I did on this entire PC build that I have coming up for you guys. Having said that, thank you for sticking around for this very long video. It was definitely longer than I anticipated, and thank you for sitting through my lunch. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Except for those trolls in there. I don't think I don't see you in there. Yes, you. Get away. I don't like trolls. Stay away. Well, anyways, like this video. If you thought it was pretty cool, maybe give me a little chance. If not, if you thought it was too long, maybe that thumbs down button is more for you. Who knows? Comments in that little section down below, you know, the little chat bubble, limits the characters, gets rid of profanity, maybe, sometimes. Well, see you guys in the next episode of Giga Hertz TV.